Happy Monday, folks, and welcome back to #AskGSM, the weekly Monday mailbag video where we answer your questions from Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, right here in this video form. Once again, a lot of great questions. We'll kick it off with Jose K from YouTube. Got two questions this week. His first one was, why are so many wrestlers getting the super kick as their signature? Luke Harper, Alberto Del Rio had it, even Paige. I love the super kick, so I'm not really all that frustrated about it. I could see where you're coming from. A lot of people don't like repetition and stuff like that. Obviously, a lot of people are using the super kick. The Usos come to mind, who you neglected to mention, but the Usos use a super kick, not even once a match, but like multiple times in one match. Like I said, the super kick is one of my favorite finishing maneuvers, if not my favorite finishing maneuver. I think it's awesome. Obviously, Shawn Michaels perfected it during the time that he used it as a Sweet Chin Music, but I love super kicks as much as the next guy, but I do agree that some people have to kind of tone it down a little bit. Like some people even kind of credit the super kick as a move that wrestlers go to get a reaction, which I could definitely see why. I mean, some people kind of look at the Young Bucks and whatever else. I don't really see that. People, do all the high-flying spots and whatever just to get a reaction from the crowd. That's not always the case. I could see where the criticism is there, but I do agree that, I don't know if this is what you're saying or not, but I do agree that some people have to kind of tone down the super kick. It's pretty much like a suicide dive outside the ropes, like maybe 10, 15 years ago when so few people would use it. It was a special thing. It would mean more. It would have more impact because not everyone did that move. It's essentially the same thing with a super kick. I don't know if as many people used it during the time that Shawn Michaels was still around, 5, 6 years ago. I can't remember exactly. I know John Morrison used it for a while as like the Nitro Blast or something like that, but I can't remember any other more people during when Shawn Michaels' time when he was around using that move as like as a regular move, which I don't think should be the case. I mean, Luke Harper does it pretty well. The Usos, like I said before, but the more that you use it as a regular move, the less it's going to mean when somebody eventually uses it as their finishing maneuver, like a Tyler Breeze, who I think uses it as their signature down in NXT. Who else? Dolph Ziggler sometimes uses a super kick as a finisher. I think he might have used it, not at Survivor Series. He used it in some big match to knock someone out. I can't remember when it was, but still, though, I mean, when people like that use it, it's not going to mean as much because everyone else does in all their matches. So I can see where you're coming from. Like, being biased here, I love the super kick, so I don't mind it, but I can see where you're coming from, and I do agree that some wrestlers kind of have to tone it down a little bit because almost everyone uses it, like you said. Your next question was, who can become the next quote-unquote beast after Brock Lesnar leaves? I feel like after what Lesnar has done in this and last year, we will always need that beast that is hard to take down and can take out multiple wrestlers at once. So I answered something similar to this a couple of weeks ago in that who's going to be the next big guy in WWE? As of right now, on the current roster, there is no one that sticks out to me as being the next big guy. And I'm not talking about like the next face of the company or whatever else. I'm talking about like the next monster in WWE. Because keep in mind, guys like the Big Show, Kane, Mark Henry, they're all winding down their careers. I mean, hopefully Big Show more than the other two. I can at least tolerate Mark Henry and Kane. Big Show, I don't know, there's just something about him that I just cannot stand in 2015. This goes back years ago, but especially in 2015 as one of the last guys standing in the Royal Rumble. Seriously, like I know that was the case in like 99, but in 2015 that just makes no sense to me. But still, though, like I said in that video a couple of weeks ago, really nothing has changed in that there really aren't many wrestlers right now in WWE, or none pretty much, that stick out to me as being the next beast. Maybe Brodus Clay back in the day, but they kind of ruined his push when they gave him the whole Funkasaurus gimmick. Colin Cassidy is the only guy that I mentioned in the last time I answered this question a couple of weeks ago. But even him, he doesn't stick out to me like a monster. He sticks out to me as like a edge test kind of hybrid character, not really like a Brock Lesnar. So maybe we get one of those wrestlers down the line. Baron Corbin, again, not that same kind of guy. Bull Dempsey, again, he's short and stocky, he's powerful, but he doesn't stick out to me as next Brock Lesnar. There will never be another Brock Lesnar. I'll say that right now. That goes without saying, and I hate to say this person's going to be the next this person, but I could see where you're getting at here in terms of who's going to fill in that role of the next beast. And not even the next beast, like the next monster. Like Big Show, Kane, Mark Henry, like I said before, are all going to be going by the wayside within the next couple of years. So we're really just going to have to wait and see. As of right now, there's nobody currently on the roster that sticks out to me, but hopefully we get one of those wrestlers as time goes on. Justin G's got a couple questions here. His first one, last week I talked about how Cesaro and Tyson Kidd are now a tag team. How long do you see Cesaro and Tyson Kidd alliance lasting until the WWE decides to break them up? Hopefully a while. I mean, Cesaro and Tyson Kidd, normally, like a lot of people, I am not a fan of them sticking two singles guys together that have nothing going for them, and they just put them together randomly in a tag team. Normally, I'm not a fan of that, because I'm more of a fan of the tag teams like the Usos, who, I mean, technically they're always going to be a tag team. There's really no point in ever breaking them up. They have no futures at all as the singles guys, but tag teams like that stick out to me as like legitimate tag teams, like the Young Bucks. Even Enzo Amore and Colin Cassidy, the Vaudevillains, those were two singles guys, but still they scream more like a tag team who have a gimmick, matching attire, stuff like that to me. The Lucha Dragon, same thing. They kind of stick out to me as like a real tag team. There are obvious exceptions, of course, and especially in recent years, I was a big fan of Air Boom, Evan Bourne, and Kofi Kingston, Team Hell No, and now the Rhodes Brothers, and that's more of a real tag team because they're real brothers and they have that chemistry. But Cesaro and Tyson Kidd are another one of those examples where I think, obviously, they had nothing going for them in singles competition, or at least Tyson Kidd did for a while. He had that storyline going on with Natalya, but they really went nowhere with it. They didn't really blow it off or anything like that. And they just kind of forgot about it, and then they just paired him with Cesaro, which I think has worked out for the better, because this is like a tag team. Although it's two singles guys, from what I read, they go down to the Performance Center, and they work on tag team maneuvers, and it shows in their matches. These guys are fucking awesome. So I would love to see them. I mean, I answered this question for you last week. I would love to see them as tag team champions at some point during their run. But to answer your question this week, how long do I see them lasting before WWE decides to break them up? Maybe, I would love to think that they would break them up, like with the Real Americans. That was another tag team, two singles guys, had nothing going for them, they put them together, and they were an awesome tag team. And this is a guy that doesn't really care all that much for Jack Swagger. But I think if they can put Cesaro and Tyson Kidd together, and they can give him a run with the tag team titles, and get Cesaro meaning something again, they can make him relevant again, and hopefully get him over to the point where he was, much like in the Real Americans, becoming like the bigger babyface of the two, and then you can split him up that way. Obviously, that didn't work out with the Real Americans. They botched Cesaro's push last year. Hopefully it's not, lightning striking twice or whatever the cliche is there. Hopefully they don't do the same thing twice and they can learn from their past mistakes and they would actually book Cesaro as a meaningful competitor in singles competition. And then we can get an awesome feud between him and Tyson Kidd. The matches would be great. So hopefully they can keep him around for a while. They only joined forces maybe 2 months ago. I think the first match they had together as a tag team was in that number one contenders gauntlet match on like one of the first episodes of Raw in December, so 2 months ago. So hopefully through the end of the year, I would love to see them get a run with the tag team titles like I expressed before, maybe as soon as Fastlane or as WrestleMania. That might be a little too quick because the Usos just won back the belts on like the final Raw of the year in December. So it might be a little bit too quick, but maybe at some point later this year you give them a run with the titles and then you can break them up either later this year or you prolong this thing as long as you can. I think these guys are awesome, like I said before, and they have a real future as a tag team if they can stay the course and they don't botch their push or anything like that. So Justin's second question was, listening to the Stone Cold podcast with Triple H earlier this week, I mean, he posted this on Friday, Triple H mentioned that DX versus nWo, they mentioned their impact in professional wrestling. Who do you think had the biggest impact in pro wrestling in the 90s, D-Generation X or the nWo, and why? So this was a great conversation starter that Triple H mentioned in the podcast, like Justin was talking about. I tweeted this out at the time as well. And I thought it was a great discussion. Obviously, Triple H being a prominent figure in D-Generation X is going to say DX. I'm sure he wasn't going to give nWo its due. And not only am I a huge nWo fan, so maybe this kind of sways my answer a bit, but even speaking, from a neutral standpoint here, I do think that nWo had the biggest impact in professional wrestling by far. I mean, I don't even think it's close. As awesome as D-Generation X was, and they did kind of alter the landscape of WWE during the time of their tenure in the late 90s and the Attitude Era, but they were already kind of going the way of the Attitude Era. They were already kind of pushing the limits long before D-Generation X started. With the Montreal Screwjob and everything else going on around that time. It really wasn't... The Attitude Era didn't start because of D-Generation X. The Attitude Era, in my mind, the whole Monday Night Wars started in my mind. I mean, a lot of people may agree with this. With the nWo and the impact that they made in the summer of 1996 when they first joined forces and WCW started kicking WWE's ass in the Monday Night Wars ratings. So that was kind of the thing that kind of kicked it all off. And I think nWo by far had a bigger impact in professional wrestling history in my mind. Who's the better faction? That's up for debate. I mean, it depends what kind of the side of the fence you're on. And I do think D-Generation X had a better run. They didn't get watered out at any point. I mean, they did technically, and I don't know, you could say for 06. I wasn't really a fan at the time, so I can't say. But definitely in 09, that was kind of a waste of a run. That was kind of like a last hurrah before Michaels retired. But I will say that D-Generation X was more consistently entertaining, obviously. Like, they had better segments on Raw and stuff like that. And nWo, after a while, you can even argue, after maybe even a year, they kind of got watered down with all the members they added in and all that other bullshit. But when they first formed, they definitely had a bigger impact. DX had a better run, but nWo had a better impact by far, in my opinion. His next question was, as always, have to throw in a Finn Balor question here, LOL. I am predicting that Finn Balor will be up on the main roster soon, but how do you think the WWE will be using him? Do you think that he should jump in with the Wolves and have him feud with Bray Wyatt or Dean Ambrose? What are your thoughts? So how soon could I see him on the main roster? Probably, I don't want to say sooner rather than later, because I think he just got to NXT back in like October, so maybe 4 months ago. I mean, Rusev was on NXT, and he already was on NXT for a while, not as Rusev, but as somebody else. But technically, the Rusev character, Alexander Rusev, was only in NXT for maybe 4 or 5 months, and that guy wasn't, at the time that he got called up, I thought it was too soon. Obviously, it worked out for the better. He's one of the best up-and-comers right now in WWE, which is great to see. I think he's really getting over on his own as a heel with Lana and that whole act and that whole shtick. But Finn Balor right now, I think, is better off in NXT for the time being. I mean, he could come up as soon as the night after WrestleMania, as soon as that. But like I've talked about before, if there's anyone that's going to be called up next, it should be either Zayn or Adrian Neville. Specifically, Sami Zayn, because I think he is more ready of the two. Adrian Neville will never be... I'm not going to say he's never going to be ready, but I think Sami Zayn has more potential of the two. Adrian Neville, in my opinion, as much as I love his work, he's never going to get beyond a certain level in the WWE. Sami Zayn, I think, can. But that being said, though, I think Finn Balor will be up maybe as soon as the end of the year. We'll find out, I guess, in due time. But to answer your question, though, when he gets called up to the main roster, what should you do with him? So you mentioned throwing him right into a feud with Bray Wyatt or Dean Ambrose, which would be cool. And this is kind of a double-edged sword here. On one end, you have him make a huge impact in that he kind of comes up, has a huge feud with a big star like a John Cena or a Bray Wyatt, as you mentioned, Dean Ambrose. That would be awesome. Don't get me wrong. Like, whenever you do that feud, whether it be as soon as he comes up or later down the line, it's going to be an awesome feud regardless. But like I said, if you have him come in this huge fashion, attacking a big star like a Bray Wyatt or beating Dean Ambrose or Bray Wyatt or whoever, so you have him beat this big star in their debut match. Obviously, it will make a star of them on day one. That kind of goes without saying. But that being said, though, when you bring them to the main roster and you put them in a feud with a top star almost immediately, and in years past, this has not worked out. You look at guys like Sheamus, Alberto Del Rio, Drew McIntyre, Jack Swagger, all these guys who got world title wins very, very quickly. They were pushed to the max. But the problem with feeding these guys to John Cena, Randy Orton, Sheamus, all the other top stars right now, the guys that you mentioned, Wyatt and Ambrose, where do you go from there? You have nowhere to go but down. Personally, I am a fan of the build-up, of the traditional build-up that you give someone, not necessarily a tag team title run. This is not always the way you have to do it, but a tag team title run, then a mid-card title run, and this has varied a lot in the recent years, and I'll go back to that in a second. And then you kind of go up to upper mid-card status, and then the main event. Like I said, that has changed a lot in recent years because the mid-card titles do not mean anything anymore. It sucks because that's just the way it is, unfortunately, but the IC... The U.S. has been better in recent months with Rusev. They've kind of made it mean something because he's not losing as many matches. But the IC title especially has been ruined. Not even in recent years, but in maybe the last 10 years has not meant as much as it probably should have. But still, though, meaning that title does not guarantee you a future shot at the World Championship. You look at the guys that have held that belt in the last couple of years, none of those guys, for the most part, a lot of the guys that have held that Intercontinental Championship, like back in the day, that was the belt that was the next step to becoming world champion. In recent years, what has it become? It's become Kofi Kingston, Bad news, Barrett. Neither guy's even contended for a world championship in the last couple of years. The Miz has won it. He won it after he already won the WWE title. Has come nowhere close to becoming main event status again. Dolph Ziggler, I mean, that remains to be seen. But he wins the IC title. You think he's on the cusp of greatness. You think he's on the cusp of the main event scene again. And then he goes right back down to mid-card. So he's another one. I'm trying to think of other people that have held that belt in recent years. Barrett, it's kind of always the same fucking people. It's either Barrett, Kingston, Miz, Ziggler. It's always the same couple of people. But like I said, these people will never really get to main event status for the most part because the mid-card title is a mid-card title. It's not this next step to greatness. So I know I'm kind of digressing here and going way off topic, but the bottom line is that I am more of a fan of the traditional build-up of giving someone a tag team title run, a mid-card title run as their own, kind of getting up and, rising up the ranks and kind of earning their spot in WWE. If you push them too aggressively, it's not going to work out. Sheamus, Del Rio, Swagger, the list goes on and on and on of guys that were pushed right into the main event scene. And where are they now? Sheamus hasn't meant anything in years. Jack Swagger is WWE superstars fodder. Del Rio is gone. Like he had in the final few years of his career in WWE, was doing next to nothing. Because we had already seen him feud with John Cena. We had already seen him feud with Randy Orton. We had already seen him as WWE and World Heavyweight Champion. So what left is there to do with him? There's nowhere to go but down. So I do not want to see Finn Balor go right in the main event scene. I mean, technically, the way that you phrase your question, you're not saying that he should go right into the world title picture, but into a feud with a guy like Bray Wyatt or Dean Ambrose. I think it'd be better off if you have Finn Balor kind of come in, do a nice little mid-card thing with a guy like Miz or Barrett or Kingston or whoever else is in the mid-card at that point in time, whenever he comes up. Do a little mini feud with them or Cesaro. Like, that would be an amazing series of matches between those two. And then you kind of have him rise up the ranks as a singles guy and then kind of earn his place from there. That's just the way that I would book it, though. His next question was, with such a great tag team chemistry in Hideo Itami, with Hideo Itami, do you think it's a great possibility that Finn Balor could open up as a tag team competitor with Itami on the main roster? So kind of going back to the Finn Balor thing here, and going back to what I was saying before, I think, like I said, the traditional build-up is better. Long-term, you think of guys like Shawn Michaels. As much as you hate John Cena, you have to admit, his build-up was like the best thing for him. He never won a tag team title early on in his career, but he was kind of like a jobber, moved into the tag team scene with Bull Buchanan, I think his name was. I can't even remember what the guy's name was. But then he became U.S. champion a couple of times, was the upper mid-card for a while, and then became WWE champion. Michaels, Cena, Triple H even, like all these guys, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, all these guys had traditional build-ups, and look where it had them. Look where they ended up. They ended up becoming the biggest stars in wrestling history. So that being said, I would love if Finn Balor came up to the main roster. Like, you don't need to have him come up like Ascension style and do all these like, lower mid-card feuds with guys like the Ascension and Los Matadores. You can have him be a tag team, but like kind of in the mid-card, kind of going in and out. But if you're going to do a tag team with Finn Balor, like you said, I think a tag team with Hideo Itami would be awesome. Those two work great together down in NXT. Finn Balor, in my opinion, has more potential than Hideo Itami. It's not really the Japanese thing. I don't know what it is, but I think both guys are going to flourish. I think Finn Balor, he just, to me, comes off like a fucking star. Like, this guy has so much potential. As soon as he makes his entrance, he has that vibe. He has that aura about him that just screams star. But I think Hideo Itami did some of his best work in NXT with Finn Balor as his tag team partner. So if you bring them up as a tag team, they would rip it up in the tag team division in WWE. Especially, imagine the matches that those two could have with Cesaro and Tyson Kidd over the tag team titles and the Usos. Like, that would be amazing. So I am all in favor of that. I don't think they'll do that, but it would be awesome, though. If you can call them up together as a tag team, that would be freaking sweet. So his next question was, do you believe that when the WWE went 3 hours long, it was a big contributing factor as to why the WWE lost a nice chunk of change? On the contrary, actually, I think it was because they went to 3 hours that they are actually making more money off of it. I know that sounds crazy because the third hour is not good, and I am in the majority here in that I think they should go back to 2 hours. I don't think it's a realistic possibility. I don't bother complaining about it on my podcast and various other outlets and that they should go back to 2 hours, because I know it's not going to happen. They make a lot of money off that third hour. So I don't think they will go back to 2 hours, or at least anytime soon. I'm not, completely writing it out of the question here. I'm not saying it's completely unlikely that they will go back to 2 hours at some point. But at least the foreseeable future, they will not be going back to 2 hours. Even Triple H himself, the COO of this company, said last week in the podcast with Stone Cold that he would, if he was in charge, would have it go back to 2 hours. But it's not all because of WWE or Vince McMahon. Obviously, that's a big factor, but it's also because of NBC and the USA Network that Raw is 3 hours. They make a lot more money off that third hour than they do with 2 hours. So, and maybe it also might be a sign of defeat for Vince McMahon. I was thinking about this a couple days ago, in that if they go back to 2 hours, it's kind of like a sign of defeat for Vince McMahon, and like, oh, we failed at 3 hours, now we have to go crawling back to 2 hours. Yes, that would be the case, and some people would see it as a failure, but I think in the long term, like I said, people will see it as a failure, but in the long term, it would work out, because with 3 hours, it's just not working. The ratings aren't there. I'm not saying the ratings would be any better with 2. I really have no idea. But from a creative standpoint, it's just not working out. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, and you have to find the positives in it, but 3 hours as opposed to 2 hours is like a hell of a long marathon. So it just doesn't work for a lot of people. That said, though, to answer your question, they didn't lose a chunk of change because of the third hour. It's mostly because of the network. The budget cuts we got in the last couple of years, that was because of the network. And if you scrap that third hour, that would put them in even a worse state financially than it would before, because they make a lot of money off that third hour. So I don't see them going back to 2 hours anytime soon. I know that's not your question, but I'm just stating that here. I don't see them going back to 2 hours anytime soon. Would love to see it, maybe down the line when Triple H eventually takes over. And yes, it would show a sign of defeat, but you got to do what you got to do. You got to just take it on the chin and just move forward. I know TNA, like when they moved to Mondays, that was an epic failure back in 2010, almost 5 years ago. It's crazy to think it's been that long. But TNA is different. They've had so many failures. I mean, that was only one of the many. Not to bash on TNA, but that only worked out. They only went to Mondays for maybe 3 or 4 months. WWE has been with 3 hours for almost 3 or 4 years by this point. So they've been with it long enough where it's not like they went to 3 hours for a month, then just scrapped it. It's been long enough where I don't think people would look at it as a disappointment or as a failure, in my opinion. So moving along here, Paul S., he's got a couple of questions here. His first one, after 3 years, we get to see Adrian Neville versus Finn Balor again, and in parentheses he put, they had an epic match before in Japan. Of these two awesome guys, who would you pick as the next step into a Daniel Bryan-like role? Great question. I think of those two, absolutely Finn Balor. I think Finn Balor comes off to me more like a star, and more like I said with Balor and Atomic, the comparison between those two, and then Neville and Zayn, I think it's really no different. Adrian Neville's like a lot like Hideo Itami in that I don't think he's going to ascend above a certain level in the WWE. I'm not saying he won't be successful, but I think he'll never make it past like maybe the mid-card, maybe the upper mid-card, but never the main event, in my opinion. Would love to see it. I just don't see it happening, unfortunately. Finn Balor, to me, like I said before, it comes off like a star, and I could see him as the next Daniel Bryan. I'm not saying he's going to be a future world champion, has a lot of potential to be, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to creative, how they're going to book him, and whatever else. Like, Daniel Bryan had the potential all along to be world champion. It was all about how they booked him. When they booked him early on in the NXT bullshit, like he was booked like a loser, as a mid-card guy, like early on in his run on the main roster, stuff like that. But of those two, I'm not saying even Finn Balor is going to become like Phil in the next role of the Daniel Bryan, but of those two, I think Finn Balor has the greater potential to fill that role than Adrian Neville, because I think Finn Balor is better on the mic. Even though he too has an accent, he comes off more like the full package than Adrian Neville does. No slight against Adrian Neville, I think he's great, but I think of those two, Finn Balor has the greater potential to fill in that role of a Daniel Bryan. His next question, in today's era, where almost all of pro wrestling info is available online, do you think it is feasible to form another franchise-changing faction, such as D-Generation X or the nWo? If yes, where would you see it? Where would you rather see it? The WWE, TNA, Lucha Underground, or Ring of Honor? And who would you select as its key people? Very good question. I mean, right now even, I think you neglected to mention here in your question, that right now, I don't know if I would call it like an industry-changing faction, but definitely a franchise-changing faction. It's not in any of the promotions that you listed. Not even watch New Japan, but I know of it, and I've heard of it, and I've seen it. The Bullet Club over in New Japan Pro Wrestling is awesome, with AJ Styles and everyone else they have in that group that I saw, because I watched the New Japan pay-per-view on the 4th of the year, earlier this year, the first pay-per-view they put on, which was great, and all the members of that clan came off like stars to me. They were all like awesome, and they all had great matches that night, and they're over, they're legitimate heels, and they're not like the nWo. They come off like a lot like the nWo, like nWo Light, but they're not like relentlessly adding members for the sake of adding members, and and stuff like that, and none of them have direction and whatever else. All of these guys are over. All of these guys are awesome athletes, and all of them have direction. From what I've seen, I can't really attest to that fully because I don't watch New Japan on a regular basis. I'm just kind of going off what I've read and heard and whatever else. But of the fact, they're kind of the new nWo for New Japan. I don't know if I would go so far as to say they're an industry-changing faction, but they've definitely kind of turned it on its head, in that a lot of people have bought their merchandise. They've got a lot of people talking like, hey, look at me, I'm talking about them right now, and this is a guy that doesn't watch New Japan on the regular. So, that said, though, another franchise-changing faction in the promotions that you mentioned, ROH kind of had that with Scum. I didn't watch ROH at the time, but I know of it, I heard of it. And that didn't last too long. They had Kevin Steen at the helm. That was a good faction from what I heard. Heel factions in general. I love factions, but they're just so overdone. TNA has tried it so many times with Immortal and Main Event Mafia, Aces and Eights, now the Beatdown Clan. It's done at nauseum with this company. And it's not even the groups themselves. It's just TNA's obsession with heel factions, and rarely did they work out. The Main Event Mafia was a bunch of old guys, and they put over some young talent in the end, not as much as they wanted to. Immortal was an epic failure. I mean, it was cool at first with Jeff Hardy going heel, oh, this is something new, it's something fresh. It all died down when Jeff Hardy got suspended. That was an epic failure. Aces and Eights, some people like them. I thought the theme was awesome. That's the only real kind thing I could say about them. They had a bunch of losers in their group, like Wes Briscoe, Garrett Bischoff, D'Lo Brown. That was a joke. And now the Beatdown Clan, I mean, it's too early to say, but I think they do have potential, but like I said, they're going to be bogged down by TNA's obsession with heel factions. So we'll see how that goes. With WWE, Lucha Underground, I think they're fine as it is. They don't have a big enough roster to kind of do a huge faction, but they do have, a pretty sweet thing going right now. And I don't like heel authority figures. They've been done, like I said, with heel factions. They've been done ad nauseum for the last 15 years since the initial heel authority figure storyline with Stone Cold and McMahon. But they have an awesome thing right now with the heel authority figure in Cueto. I think that guy is awesome. And he's not even a wrestler or anything like that. That guy's just an actor they hired to play that role. But he's so great that I don't mind it. As far as WWE goes, we kind of already had that a couple of years ago with the Nexus. Was it a franchise-changing faction like DX or nWo? Absolutely not. But it did have the potential, though. And even years later, people are still talking about it. Was it one of the best factions ever? That's kind of depend on who you talk to. I love the Nexus. I don't think they had that huge of an impact where they changed the industry or anything like that, or they changed the course of WWE. They definitely did in their first night. The Aftermath, not done so well. I mean, I talked about this before here on the show, in that at SummerSlam that year, that was kind of like the unofficial death of the Nexus. I know they lasted officially for another year, but that was kind of the beginning of the end for the Nexus when they lost to Team WWE unnecessarily. And then after that, they were never the same. But we kind of already had that with the Nexus. I don't know if you would call them a faction, but the Shield was that faction, in my opinion, that kind of changed WWE, and it's still changing WWE. All three of these guys, Seth Rollins brings up the Shield every single time he comes up on WWE programming, and I don't think that's a bad thing. He still gets the you sold out chance, and stuff like that. I think it's just kind of a testament to how great they were as a team. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that the Shield was awesome. But and I still say this to this day, that the Shield was the best book stable since Evolution, or even better than Evolution. And Evolution was more about the aftermath and then making stars out of Orton and Batista. And I mean, it's still too early to tell whether we're going to get the same thing with the Shield. But as of right now, all three guys are at the top of the company, with the exception of Dean Ambrose. Even he's up there, though. He's main evented pay-per-views. Rollins has main evented pay-per-views. Roman Reigns as well. I mean, last summer when he was contending for the World Heavyweight Championship with Cena and all the other guys. Now he's going to be main eventing WrestleMania against Brock Lesnar. I mean, maybe it's Daniel Bryan. We'll have to wait and see. But still, though, right now, the Shield, everything about the group when they were together and all the aftermath has been amazing. Future-wise, though, could we get a faction that could be on the same level as a DX or nWo? I mean, that was more than a franchise-changing faction like I talked about with Justin's question earlier. They changed the course of the industry, more so nWo than DX. I don't know if we're ever going to get that again. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, there's really no one right now that I would make a faction out of. I mean, I think I've talked about this here on the show before. a couple of weeks ago. There's no one right now on the WWE roster that sticks out to me as being like they need to be in a faction right now. The best factions come out of nowhere, like the Nexus. Like I would have never foreseen that coming. The Shield, who would have ever seen that coming? Like stuff like that is like that makes for the best factions in my opinion. The nWo, same thing. So we'll have to wait and see. No one right now kind of sticks out to me as being a franchise-changing faction, but we kind of already had that, like I said before, with the Shield and Nexus, and currently with the Bullet Club over in New Japan. His next question was, do you think Chael Sonnen would have a great chance if he shifts over to the WWE? If you mean of like accomplishing or being successful in the WWE, I think absolutely. I think Chael Sonnen is awesome. I do mixed martial arts, but I'm a UFC casual fan at best. But from what I've seen of him, what I've heard from him on his podcasts and various other outlets, I think he's great. And he just screams WWE. He is a huge wrestling fan, and I think this question is kind of based off the reports that surfaced last week, and that there were reports that he might be at WrestleMania. I would love to see him working with WWE. I mean, he's known for being a liar, so I mean, I'll see it. I'll believe it when I see it. But the mic skills this guy has, and the ability to have people turn against him, both in real life and in the UFC and in on Twitter, whatever else. The guy is a great heel. I mean, I know he's not playing a character, that's just who he is, but the way that he can manipulate people, manipulate audiences and stuff like that, it's great, and I think we need more of those kind of people, and I think even if he doesn't wrestle, and it's more like a commentator role or something for the network, or an ambassador to the company, I have no idea, but I would love to see Chael Sonnen in WWE. Would he be successful? I think absolutely. I think they missed the boat with him and bringing him in a couple of years ago, when he was at his peak, and he could wrestle for WWE and stuff like that. I think the chances of him wrestling for the company now are a lot less likely, but I still do think he would find success in WWE in whatever role they put him in, because he's that damn good. Next question here. What if Samoa Joe or Nigel McGuinness came to WWE instead of TNA? Samoa Joe, I don't know. I think there was a shot of him going to WWE. I think I heard him talk about this in an interview a while ago with Sam Roberts. I think it was last summer. And that he did a tryout for WWE before he came to TNA, and I don't think they ever called him back. It wasn't a case of him going to TNA and then saying, oh, we want you right now, and he chose TNA over WWE. I don't think that was ever the case. They just never wanted him, and now it's too late. The guy is nowhere near his peak. I mean, his peak was back in like 06, 07, 08, when he was undefeated and world champion and whatever else. Now it's too late. I would have loved to see him in WWE, especially in a feud with Umaga. That kind of obviously writes itself, and they might have done that feud had Umaga lived. He passed away in late 09, and I think there might have been signs of him going to TNA. I'm not really sure, and that would have been an awesome feud had Umaga lived. But what if Samoa Joe came to WWE? It's the same thing with AJ Styles. Maybe they would have done something with him. More than likely, probably not. He would have been a mid-carder at best, or a lower mid-carder. Had he had success in TNA and then jumped over to WWE in like 09, maybe they would have done something with him because they know how well, they know how great of a potential he has, and then would have done something awesome with him. Even then, I'm not even sure they would have utilized him correctly. I mean, I guess we'll never really know. With Nigel McGuinness, he was a different case in that he actually went to WWE along with Daniel Bryan at the same exact time in late 2009, from what I believe anyway. This is from what I know. As the story goes, he had the physical test or the health test or whatever it was, and he did not pass it because something was not up to par or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he did not pass the physical. Bottom line, he did not pass the physical, so he could not go to WWE. So he went to TNA almost immediately afterwards. Like, after he failed that physical, TNA gave him a call, answered the call, signed a contract with the company, made his debut in TNA, beat Kurt Angle's first night in. Like, he had a huge impact when he debuted for TNA. And that didn't really work out to the best of his ability. They never really utilized him to his full potential. Like, he had a great feud with Kurt Angle, but after that feud, he did nothing. And I know he was only with the company for another year or so, but they never really did anything with him. Like, they put him in a feud with Abyss, of all people. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I know that was more than, it was something at that time, and Abyss was still relevant, but I mean, still, they could have done a lot more with Nigel McGuinness than what they did. And of course, the health issue kind of ended his career, so that sucks, and it was really bad timing, but still, though, I think he could have done great things in WWE, in that, he's a great talent. I haven't seen much of his work, but from what I have seen of him, in his ROH work and the stuff that he did in TNA in 09 and 2010, The guy was awesome on the mic, in the ring. Again, I don't think WWE would have made him into a star like I said with Samoa Joe. They probably just would have made him a mid-carder. That's kind of the case, but at least TNA gives people chances, and not every single time did they hit it out of the park. Like they had Okada in their company a couple of years ago, and they fucking botched that to shit. That guy had so much potential, and they utilized him as Samoa Joe's bodyguard or something so stupid like that, and they just wasted him. So not every time does TNA hit it out of the park with people they sign, but at least they gave those guys a chance. Samoa Joe, one of the biggest stars in TNA history. Nigel McGuinness would have been had his health not become an issue, but I don't think they would have been like ultra successful in WWE. Maybe if they would have given it a chance. I guess we'll never really know, but it's more of those what-if situations where I think they could have been successful if WWE got behind them. I don't have enough faith in WWE that they would have done that, though. JRH from Facebook, his question was, what, in your opinion, is the most memorable PG-era moment? And he wanted to list a whole bunch of moments from the last couple of years, from 2008 onwards, like Brock Lesnar's debut, Dolph Ziggler cashing in, and he even put Adam Rose in the Bunny's debut on Raw. I don't know if that was a joke or not, but that made me laugh. But the most memorable moment in PG era, since 2008 we're going back here, there's a lot of candidates, but maybe not as many as I think. I mean, maybe I'm stretching here. Like you said in your comment, one of the ones that you listed, Brock Lesnar's debut, I think is got to be up there. Same thing with The Rock's return. I think both moments were amazing and both so well handled, especially with The Rock and the way that he came back, and Brock Lesnar, and look at the run that he's had over the last 3 years. Some people will say that WWE did not utilize him to the best of their ability, and to an extent that's true, but look at all the feuds, look at all the matches, look at all the titles. I mean, he won one championship, but he's held it for fucking 8 months. Look at all the shit that he's done in the last 3 years. He's beaten John Cena. He beat Triple H twice. He's beaten CM Punk. He's had very good matches with all those people and some others as well. So I think Brock Lesnar's return has been a success. In my opinion, though, no moment in the PG era in the last 7 years has been bigger than CM Punk's pipe bomb. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a big CM Punk fan, but you look back in the last 8 years, and a lot of people, not when they turn PG, but just, you know, it just happens where people just fall out of wrestling, they just stop watching, shit like that happens. And I think the pipe bomb was one of those moments where people still say to me to this day, that was the moment, that was the storyline, the whole Summer of Punk thing in 2011 got them into wrestling, got them back into wrestling. Some people started watching at that point. Some people started, getting back into wrestling at that point because it was such a hot storyline. They could not mess it up at that time, and they eventually did when they had him lose to Triple H. That's another rant for another day. But that whole pipe bomb angle, that moment, the unscriptedness. I mean, we all knew it was a scripted shoot or whatever, a work shoot, whatever you want to call it. But it was one of those moments where time stood still. It made CM Punk into a star that night. He was already a former World Heavyweight Champion, but, he was launched into a different stratosphere after that moment on the night of June 27, 2011 in Las Vegas on Monday Night Raw. So in my opinion, that's the most memorable PG-era moment. People still talk about it to this day, and all the implications, everything that followed after it. And like I said before, for the sheer fact that it brought so many fans back, and not like a gross amount of people, not like a tremendous amount of people, but a decent number. A lot of people from what I've talked to and who I've heard from in articles that I've written and people that I've talked to. I had a teacher in high school, a wrestling fan, and he said that he fell out of it for a while after the Benoit death. In 2007, he didn't watch through 2008 and 2009 and whatever, but he did get back into it because of CM Punk in 2011. So that kind of goes to show how big of an impact that did have when it happened 4 years ago. And in the era, the overall era of the PG era in the last 6-7 years. Josh S., his question was, what did you think of Jericho's recent interview where he suggested at WrestleMania, Roman Reigns headlines the championship title match against Seth Rollins and Brock Lesnar and goes on to face Daniel Bryan? Would you prefer that plan to the seemingly inevitable Roman Reigns-Brock Lesnar? So, of course, Josh asked this last night on Sunday on the Facebook page, but has now since broken out. The news, I guess now, as of Monday morning, is that Vince McMahon has changed his mind, and the new plan is that it's going to be Daniel Bryan versus Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. I will believe it when I see it. If Daniel Bryan goes over, then we'll see. But as of right now, despite that rumor, I still think that Roman Reigns goes over at Fastlane. That being said, though, I did see the interview that you're talking about. It came out on Saturday, I think it was. And as big of a Jerichoholic as I am, I did not agree with the comments. Brock Lesnar, of the many issues with this scenario, I think Brock Lesnar has to be the champion going into WrestleMania. What was the point of putting the championship on him and then not going into WrestleMania with it? You know what I mean? I've talked about this, time and time again, especially before the Rumble, and that there was no point in taking the title off of Brock Lesnar at the Royal Rumble, because then what was the point of him not being there for the entire fall? Like, I think if he's going to drop the championship, if you want to have this whole storyline with Brock Lesnar and ending the streak be a success, he cannot be beaten via pinfall or submission, whatever, until WrestleMania, until he faces Roman Reigns or Daniel Bryan or whoever. He cannot lose that championship until WrestleMania. That's when it's going to mean something. So I do not agree with that. And then, what was the other thing he said? Reigns and Rollins in the title match. I don't think that's a big enough selling point for WrestleMania. Like I said, I don't know if it was in this forum or on WrestleRant Radio or whatever, but never in the last, at least in the last 10 years or so, from what I can remember, they put someone in the main event that wasn't already established. Let's see here. Let's go down the line. I don't want to go down to every single WrestleMania main event here, but 2014, Orton and Batista were already stars. Daniel Bryan was not at that point in time, but Orton and Batista were kind of the selling point for the main event. 2013, Rock and John Cena. 2012, The Rock and John Cena. 2011, Miz and John Cena. Cena was the selling point. 2010, Michaels and Undertaker, that sells itself. 2009, Triple H and Orton. The list goes on and on and on. Never before have they put two young guys in the main event. I'm not saying I'm not in favor of it. That would be fucking awesome and another step towards the future of the WWE. I just don't think WWE would do that, and Brock Lesnar, like I said before, has to be the champion going into WrestleMania. So no, I think that plan would actually be worse than the plan that they already have lined up. Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar, as much as people want to hate on it and shit on it and whatever, and the match may be crap, and maybe that's going to be the case. Like I said, I still think that Roman Reigns goes on to WrestleMania to win that World Championship against Brock Lesnar. And it's not like he's being booed constantly like Batista was on the road to WrestleMania last year. He's still getting a good amount of cheers. Not everybody is pooping on Roman Reigns right now, so I don't know where you need to, just because of the reaction he got at the Rumble, you need to automatically, switch him into a heel ASAP. You can turn him heel at WrestleMania. I'm all in favor of that. And you could do a double turn with him and Lesnar, and if Lesnar leaves, then you put Paul Heyman with Roman Reigns. You could do that. I think that'd be great. But, that said, though, I think Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar, as much as people want to shit on it, it makes sense from a storyline standpoint. I mean, Daniel Bryan's story would have made more sense, but Roman Reigns is a young guy. He's going to get a nice rub from beating Brock Lesnar, winning his first World Championship. Whether Seth Rollins cashes in after that remains to be seen. I mean, we'll find out when it happens. But it needs to be Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar for the championship, or Bryan versus Lesnar. It needs to be someone conquering the beast, the same man that put the 1 in 21-1 against The Undertaker last year at WrestleMania, beating Brock Lesnar in the main event of WrestleMania for that championship. That's the only way it's going to play out. It doesn't matter if it's Roman Reigns or Daniel Bryan, but that needs to be the way it's planned out. I see where Jericho is coming from, and it's not the worst thing in the world. Like, I would love to see Bryan versus Lesnar in a non-title matchup. That would be cool, but from a storyline standpoint, you need to keep the championship on Brock Lesnar going into WrestleMania. That's the only way it needs to play out. Christian H., his question was, do you think DDP, Diamond Dallas Page, deserves to be in the Hall of Fame? Yes, I do. I do think he's had a Hall of Fame worthy career. And, people will say, oh, he never did anything in WWE, and blah, 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 blah. There's no real criteria for going into the WWE Hall of Fame. At the end of the day, it's all politics, so that's a whole bunch of bullshit. It's all subjective. In my opinion, anyway, I do think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame after the career he had in WCW and being one of the shining lights in that company in its final few years, and everything else he's accomplished. And, helping, I know this is not wrestling related, but everything that he's done for the company in terms of DDP Yoga and getting people back in shape and helping Jericho with his career, RVD, Ryback, the list goes on and on and on, and getting Jake the Snake Roberts and Scott Hall back into, good condition in order for them to be inducted in the Hall of Fame last year. And I know that doesn't really play a factor in whether you go in the Hall of Fame or not, because if that was the case, then Chris Nowinski, who is like a head concussion expert, has helped WWE a lot over the years with that kind of stuff, had a very abysmal WWE run. But from that standpoint, you know, he's done a lot for the company, but I don't think he's ever going to go into the Hall of Fame for that. Maybe a special wing, I don't really know. But DDP, for all the work and all the success that he had over in WCW, I do think he deserves to be in WWE, the Hall of Fame. And like I said before, people will say, oh, we never did anything in WWE, that's why Sting shouldn't go in. Listen, WWE owns WCW and ECW, so for whatever work that they did, for whatever Hall of Fame or whatever stuff they did in WCW versus ECW, and ECW, that will make you worthy of an induction for the WWE Hall of Fame. That's the way that I see it. Like I said, at the end of the day, it's all politics. It's all really subjective, but in my opinion, yes, I do think that DDP deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Maybe as soon as this year. I know he recently got some throat surgery, so he may not be in the best of condition. But after what happened last year and getting Jake the Snake Roberts and Scott Hall into the Hall of Fame, I do think that, you know, it would be a great year for him going to the Hall of Fame this year, especially after the, you know, really cool cameo that he had in the Royal Rumble a couple of weeks ago. At Brad Burdar, his question was, as much as they love Bayley, why do people believe her main roster run is going to be any different than Emma's? So great question here, and I am also in that category of people that loves Bayley and do think that she could. Keyword could have success in the main roster, given that her current gimmick and her current persona, the fan-loving, very fan-friendly and stuff like that, will get over on the main roster because that fits the PG era, the PG product to a T. I wrote an article about this about a year ago on Bleacher Report. If you want to Google it or whatever, it's on there. But I do think she could have a good main roster run. She's a great wrestler. I think she has a great gimmick. Some people thinks it's crap. I think it's great. I think it's going to get over well with the PG era audience. That said, though, like with Emma, it's all a matter of how they book her when she gets called up. Emma was booked so terribly. They put her with fucking Santino of all people. That bombed. They did nothing with her. They had the whole, the jail issue and the whole iPod case stealing dilemma. No pun intended. But they had that whole bullshit thing going on, and that really did her no favors, and she's done absolutely nothing in the time since. She's hardly ever even on TV. So it sucks. But that said, though, I do think if they can book Bayley in a better light, then she could have success in the main roster. We really don't know. I'm not saying that she's going to have success in the main roster because it's really all a matter of how they book her. Even Paige, I think, has had a great run on the main roster. Some people may not agree. I mean, she's the former Divas champion and whatever else, a two-time Divas champion. But the way that her feud with AJ played out last year and the way that everything else, happened with her and the way they booked her character was not good, especially early on. So that said, though, I don't know for sure. Nobody knows for sure whether Bayley is going to have success in the main roster, but there is the potential there. It really all goes back to potential and the possibility of her having success, because I do think she's a great enough wrestler. She has a good enough persona that fits with the current product that she could get over big time in the main roster in the Divas division. We'll have to wait and see how they handle her, but only time will tell, I guess I could say. But next question from him was that who do you think is most likely to be a Hall of Famer someday out of Cody Rhodes, The Miz, AJ Lee, or Kofi Kingston? Good question. Of those four, I think the least likely, I hate to say it, but it's got to be Cody Rhodes. Because in the grand scheme of things, I mean, like I said before, the Hall of Fame, it's really all subjective. Cody Rhodes, in his career, yes, he's the former IC champion, former tag team champion, but outside of that, he's really not done much. He's had a lot of success in his career, like I said, as a glorified tag team wrestler, but he hasn't had a Hall of Fame career yet. Maybe if they, ditch this Stardust bullshit and they make him Cody Rhodes again, and they kind of make him what he's destined to be in a future world champion, we'll have to wait and see. But that said, right now, I don't think he has a Hall of Fame worthy career. The Miz, say what you will about him, that he didn't deserve the run that he did with the WWE title. It wasn't good. It was shit. He didn't deserve the main event WrestleMania and beat John Cena at WrestleMania 27. But all the success that he's had in the course of WWE over the last 10 years, this guy's been with the company for almost a decade at this point. Like I said before, headline WrestleMania, beat John Cena, former WWE champion, multi-time IC champion, multi-time US champion, multi-time tag team champion. Like, the list goes on and on and on. So I do think The Miz is worthy eventually, and not like ASAP as soon as he retires, but down the line I do think he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Kofi Kingston, to me, much like Cody Rhodes, was has been a glorified mid-card guy, in that he may go into the Hall of Fame one day, like in the Coco Beware category, where he's not really deserving, but he's, he had an impact on the business in terms of, longevity, and people loved him. He was popular, so maybe. But again, a former. The only thing that separates Miz from Kofi is that Miz headlined WrestleMania, and he's a former WWE champion. That's pretty much it. Aside from that, they pretty much had the same career. Kofi Kingston, glorified mid-card guy, former multi-time tag team champion, IC champion, US champion, may get in for all the title wins that he's had, but to me, all the amount of championships that you've held should not be, the only objective, the only what's the word I'm looking for here? The only category, I guess. I'm struggling to find the word right now, that to induct someone into the WWE Hall of Fame. So I'm fucking struggling to think of the word that they would use. The only thing that would make him worthy, I guess, to put him in the Hall of Fame should be the amount of championships that he's held. I don't agree with that. I know that kind of goes against what they said with Miz, but like I said, Miz headlined WrestleMania and was WWE champion. That, to me, puts him ahead of the pack. So, and he's had longevity, too. But AJ Lee, I think for the women, it's easier to get in the Hall of Fame because there's not a lot of women over the last 10, 15 years that have had a big impact in WWE. There's not a lot. Like Mickie James, future Hall of Famer. I think you could put Jazz and Jacqueline there at some point. Chyna, absolutely. We already kind of talked about that on the Triple H podcast last week with Stone Cold on the WWE Network. I'm not going to get into that here. But I do think the career that AJ has had so far in WWE over the last 5 years is deserving at some point down the line, not ASAP, but down the line, of a Hall of Fame induction. The longest reigning Divas champion in WWE history, a 3-time Divas champion on top with on record with Eve Torres, also a former Raw general manager, a big part in the whole CM Punk and Daniel Bryan storyline back in 2012 and 2013, and turning heel and being with Dolph Ziggler, and everything else she's done in her career, I think is Hall of Fame worthy. But yeah, of those four, those are my thoughts on them being the most likely of the Hall of Famers. So of those four, either Miz or AJ. But I'd probably go with Miz, probably AJ too, because they always have to induct a woman every year, and at some point they'll run out of people to induct. And they'll throw in AJ at some point, when she's done in wrestling or whatever else, along with Mickie James. But I think Miz is also very worthy of a Hall of Fame induction at some point. Is he the most worthy person out there? No, but I think of all the credentials that he's had in the WWE title run and headlining WrestleMania and the impact that he's had on the business, or at least in WWE, not a major impact. But in terms of all the the things that he's done for the company over the years, he will be in the Hall of Fame at some point down the line. Next question from Brad was, whose podcast do you prefer and why? Stone Cold Steve Austin's or Chris Jericho's? Great question. I love both. I love theirs. I love JR's. I'm a big fan of all their podcasts. Of those three, I enjoy Austin and Jericho's more. It's really all personal taste and what you like, what you're interested in. If you're a die-hard wrestling fan and don't give a shit about anyone outside of wrestling, then you will not like Jericho's podcast, because he has people all the time from movies, from artists and stuff like that, to ghost hunters he had on last week. He has a wide variety of people on his podcast, mostly wrestlers, but a lot of people in the entertainment business as well. Stone Cold Steve Austin, most of his podcasts are more just him talking, just shooting the shit, talking about what's going on in his life, answering questions. If you're a big Austin fan, if you're a big Stone Cold fan, then you'll love his podcast. I love both the podcasts. Of the two, who do I prefer? Probably Jericho's, because I don't know how he does it, probably because he's on better terms with the company or whatnot. I'm not saying that Austin isn't, but he's had his fucking podcast on the network, unlike Jericho. But Jericho is there, like he's wrestling, and in between matches, I guess, he records and conducts interviews with the wrestlers. He's had pretty much almost all of my favorites on, with the exception of Regal and Punk. Regal's probably a lot more likely than Punk right now. I don't think they're on the best of terms right now, but I do think at some point that maybe Regal will be on. But going back to what I was saying before, Jericho gets the guests. He's had Triple H. He's had Batista. He's got Hall of Famer Shawn Michaels on next week. He had a Hulk Hogan, Wade Barrett, everybody on the main roster right now. He's had all the divas for the most part. He's had almost like a majority, more than half of the people on the current roster he's had on his podcast for great interviews, which I love. But that said, though, that's why I probably prefer Jericho's podcast. He's more of an entertainer. And even the non-wrestler interviews that he does with people in the music business or the movie business or even the Ghostbusters that he has on his podcast, I think are so entertaining. I love it. Like Jericho, I'm a big enough Jerichoholic where I will listen to his stuff that is not wrestling related because I think he's great. He's a great host. I learn more about the people that he interviews and stuff like that. I think it's awesome. So I prefer Jericho's, but I love both podcasts. Stone Cold's is awesome too. And I think him just shooting the shit and him, answering questions and talking to his friends in the ranch and stuff like that, the Broken Skull Ranch, and talking about his TV shows is also very entertaining. Next question, what are your thoughts on Charlotte's recent comments recently saying that she will main event a pay-per-view someday? I don't think that's very likely. I know that's her just kind of shooting for the stars, and I commend that. I don't ever see women like the Divas main eventing a pay-per-view. Kind of goes all back to what I was saying before. Do I think and do I want? Two very different things. Do I think they're going to main event a pay-per-view one day? Very, 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 very unlikely. Not saying it's never going to happen, just very unlikely. Would I love to see it? Sure. Not like the main event of WrestleMania, but it would be sweet, though. I think the first step in getting to that point is main eventing Raw again. I think that's the first step in getting to the main event of a pay-per-view. Only maybe twice before in history has a women's title match, or a women's match main evented Raw, in Trish and Lita, and then maybe Victoria and Lita, I think, too, or Victoria and Trish. I forgot what the other match was. But you guys, they need to have the women main event the show again before they can main event a pay-per-view. If anyone's going to do it, of the current crop of women, it's going to be Charlotte. I think she has a lot of potential, maybe AJ as well. But I think of all the current divas, I think Charlotte does have the potential. I don't think it's very likely, but it would be sweet, though. Like I said, don't have much faith in WWE to ever book them in the main event of Raw, much less a pay-per-view, but it is interesting now. I mean, they've taken chances in the past with main events of pay-per-views. You need to get people caring about the women's division first. It's not their fault. It's a fucking booking of their product and how people perceive the divas and the women. It's horrendous. But they've taken risks in the chance, and I mean they've taken risks in the past with and it's not necessarily risks, but they do switch up the main event of pay-per-views because they're on the network now. They don't have to adhere to the pay-per-view model. Like with TLC and Hell in a Cell, like at TLC, instead of putting Cena and Rollins in the main event, they put Bray Wyatt and Dean Ambrose in the main event. Hell in a Cell, it was Ambrose and Rollins, not Cena and Orton. Like, you don't have to adhere to the traditional pay-per-view format because it's a lot different with the WWE Network than it was on pay-per-view. Next question from @DanielCabeza59. What is your favorite match at WrestleMania? Very broad question. If we're talking about like WrestleManias that I've seen or been a fan for, because I've been a fan since 2008, so we're going back to WrestleMania 25 here, because I wasn't a fan for 24. From the WrestleManias that I've been a fan for, that I've seen and whatever else, that's really hard to say. I know people are going to like shit on me for this, but I love Rock and Cena 28. I thought that was a really good match, very underrated from a storyline from like a storytelling standpoint. I thought that was great. Triple H and Undertaker from that same year, Punk and Jericho from that same year. 27, didn't really care for many of the matches. 26, same thing. Probably Shawn Michaels and Undertaker, not just from WrestleManias that I've been a fan for, but WrestleManias that I've seen. One of the best WrestleMania matches in history. So that's definitely got to be up there in terms of my favorite. I watched WrestleMania 21 last year on the network, and I absolutely loved the match between Kurt Angle and Shawn Michaels. I thought it was phenomenal. I'm going to have to go back and watch it again on the road to WrestleMania this year. So that's got to be on my list of favorite matches. There's no one match that sticks out above the rest, but those two are up there. Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels from 21, Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker from 25, as well as the few WrestleMania 28 matches that I mentioned before, as well as from 30, the triple threat in the main event, which I also thought was great, needless to say. Next question from Daniel was, what was your favorite feud in wrestling? Without a doubt, Randy Orton versus Christian from 2011. As great as the feud between John Cena and Punk was, it was a great angle, but the feud itself was never really resolved, and they've had awesome matches and whatever else. But the best, most consistent feud that WWE has done, not the best, but my favorite anyway, Randy Orton versus Christian. The matches were always awesome. It's hard to pick like the best match out of all the matches they had that summer because they were all amazing. The story was there with Christian turning heel. Didn't necessarily agree with him having 2 short title runs, but at least he had the belt at all. I mean, that's something. But everything about that summer, everything about that feud I love so much, and maybe it's just me because I have a special place in my heart for the year of 2011 in WWE, but that feud was so great, so by far my favorite feud in wrestling, and it kind of ties back into the, to WWE 2K15 recently releasing it for their video game in the showcase mode, which I will hopefully get at some point. I really want to play that feud. That looks like it's going to be awesome. But by far, favorite feud in wrestling, Randy Orton versus Christian. Next question, do you think if Roman Reigns beats Daniel Bryan at Fastlane, it would cause another backlash from the fans? If the plan right now is to still have Roman Reigns go to the main event of WrestleMania and win the championship, which I still do think is the plan, I think it was better for them to acknowledge the controversy of the Royal Rumble and do the match at Fastlane instead of completely ignoring it and put Daniel Bryan in a match with Bray Wyatt or whatever it was that they mentioned in a recent Dirt Sheet report. If Bryan, I don't know how they'll handle it. I don't even know if Daniel Bryan, endorsing Roman Reigns after the matchup is going to even help Roman Reigns' case all that much. But at least they're acknowledging Daniel Bryan's popularity right now. They're giving him a shot to main event WrestleMania, which I still think he'll lose. But still, though, I don't know if it's going to cause another backlash. I don't think you're going to get enough, shit from the fans on Roman Reigns like we got at Royal Rumble. I think it's for the better, the current direction they're taking. It's a big clusterfuck right now the way they're handling it. But I do give them credit for at least trying to make the most of a shitty situation and putting Reigns and Bryan in the main event of Fastlane. So I don't think it's going to cause another huge backlash from the fans. There will be, of course, those fans that will continue to resent Roman Reigns on the road to WrestleMania. If the plan, I still do think the plan is Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania for the championship, you're still going to have those fans, but the backlash will not be as big as it was from the Rumble, because at this point, I think people have just accepted that's going to be the main event. There's always a chance that Bryan wins. Don't think it's going to happen. But if Roman Reigns wins, the backlash will not be as big as it was at the Rumble, in my opinion. At Marachi from Twitter, question was, who would you love to see as the next Mr. Money in the Bank? A lot of candidates here. I've got Dean Ambrose. I think that'd be sweet. Almost won it both in 2013 and 2014 respectively. I think he has all the potential in the world, all the tools in the world to be a future world champion. So Dean Ambrose this year would be great. Now for kind of the stretches, Bad News Barrett has been in line for a Money in the Bank run for a long time now. And I think not so much now. It was kind of his original character. He doesn't really do it now with the bad news stuff, but like when he was Wade Barrett, way back when, he was all about the money. He was all about being greedy. And I thought the briefcase was perfect for him. I thought it was a perfect gimmick for Bad News Barrett. And I do think one day he should be World Heavyweight Champion. He deserves it. He's got all the tools in the world to be a future world champ. So Barrett would be great, Mr. Money in the Bank. Cesaro would be awesome too. I strongly thought he was walking out of June, the June Money in the Bank pay-per-view last year with the briefcase, but he was put in the title match instead. But still, though, Cesaro would be a great future World Heavyweight Champion as a Mr. Money in the Bank. And Cody Rhodes, that's a bit of a stretch. Cody Rhodes should have won it like at least 3 times already. He's been in the Money in the Bank ladder match more times than a lot of people on the current roster. And Cody Rhodes, like I've said in the past, does have a lot of, I've said this word so many times so far in the video, but a lot of potential, and I think they have a lot of untapped potential with Cody Rhodes that they could be doing with him right now. And they're wasting him in the current Stardust gimmick. He's making it work, and I'm sure he loves the gimmick, but, he loves dedicating himself to that persona, but he is deserving of so much more currently in WWE. He could be on a much better place on the card as a top face, heel. I would like to see him as a face, because that's not really been done before for the most part. But that said, though, I do think if Cody Rhodes could win the Money in the Bank briefcase this upcoming June, it would get him back on track for a nice little run at the end of the year or whatever. But still, those are my 4 candidates for the next Mr. Money in the Bank. Dean Ambrose, Bad News, Wade Barrett, whatever you want to call him, Cesaro, and Cody Rhodes. At R8ED_M, he's got 2 questions. First one was, where do you see the status of pro wrestling this year? Now, I don't necessarily like the broad questions. It's nothing against this guy or anybody that asks the broad question. It's just that it's kind of hard to answer, and I feel bad not giving you a great in-depth answer here, because anything can happen. Like, if you asked me a year ago if I thought 2014 was going to be one of the most noteworthy, unforgettable years, for better or for worse, in wrestling history, specifically WWE, I would have never believed you. But after everything that happened with CM Punk, the Network, Warrior, the Streak, Shield breaking up, everything that happened last year, would have never saw it coming. That said, with 2015, I think the Network is in a better place. They recently broke 1 million subscribers. In the world of wrestling, because you didn't say the status of WWE, the world of wrestling, they've got a lot of, I don't know what happened with Global Force Wrestling, whatever the fuck they're going to do with that company, with Jeff Jarrett, but I think the wrestling landscape is a little better off than it was at this time a year ago, in that NXT will continue to flourish. It was great a year ago, but it's continuing to develop, and more eyes are getting on the product. NXT is amazing. At this point last year, we did not have Lucha Underground, which I think is a great promotion. I did an interview with the executive producer of the promotion, Chris DeJoseph, a former WWE creative writer, on last week's edition of Wrestle Rant Radio. If you want to go back and check it out on nextairawrestling.weebly.com. Cheap plug there. But yeah, Lucha Underground is awesome. Check it out if you're not already. And, of course, New Japan is already, they've launched their own network. They're doing pretty well for themselves. They had their first American pay-per-view last month in February, like I said before, which I checked out, which I thought was great. So I think wrestling right now is in a bit of a better place than it was about a year ago. I'm not saying it's going to, launch another wrestling boom like it was in the 80s, or we're going to have like another attitude era or anything like that. But I do think the current status of wrestling is good. I'm not going to say it's like amazing, but I am, being the optimist that I am, I'm going to say that, the future of wrestling this upcoming year might be pretty good. I think we're in line for some pretty sweet things from WWE, TNA, their rebranding, and Lucha Underground, NXT, maybe Global Force Wrestling, Japan, New Japan Pro Wrestling. So a lot of great things coming down the pike for pro wrestling, in my opinion. His second question was, do you think that Triple H and Stephanie McMahon can run WWE successfully once Vince is done? I think so. I mean, that was the feeling that I got after listening to the Triple H interview last week. There were a lot of things that I think he said that I thought were bullshit. The stuff with CM Punk, and I mean, he's very careful with his words. It was not as revealing as an interview as it was with Vince back in December. That said, though, I really did enjoy the interview, and Triple H has a hell of a mind for the business. He's not perfect. He still has personal agendas against some people, like the China thing, and I mean that has more to do with Stephanie than Triple H, but I digress. CM Punk and whatever. He still has, like Vince, holds some grudges. That said, though, he has a much better business sense in 2015 than Vince does. I'm not saying Vince is terrible, but like I said last week in the video, and then elsewhere in articles and Wrestle Rant Radio and wherever else, Triple H is so much more in touch with what the fans want, with what wrestling needs, with what WWE needs right now than Vince is. So I think once Vince is done, which I don't think he's going to do, he's not going to, give up the reins to Triple H and Stephanie until he dies, which hopefully is never anytime soon. I hate to even think about that, but I do think when Triple H and Stephanie take over, WWE will be in better hands in terms of like creative input and stuff like that. I think Triple H has he has the mind of the business. He is a wrestling fan at heart. He knows what the fans want. And based off what he said in that interview, and from what we've seen in recent years, and getting back on good terms with the Warrior, Bruno Sammartino, and Bob Backlund, and so many other people in the last couple of years, the Poffo family, that I do think that WWE will be in good hands when Vince, eventually croaks or gives up the reins to Triple H and Stephanie, which I don't think is going to happen, but when he eventually is done with WWE, when, like you said, I do think WWE will be not in a way better place. I do think Triple H and Stephanie can make some good improvements, but I do think the future of WWE is bright with Triple H and Stephanie at the helm. And final question here from @Reborn again. His question was, what are the chances that NXT TakeOver is better than Fastlane? Very, very good. I will just say that much. I mean, just look at the last couple of specials from NXT. Not the first one, but the second one. The first one was like a couple days after Elimination Chamber, and it blew that pay-per-view out of the water. That was the real pay-per-view right there. And that was like right after the launch of the network. The first live in-ring special on the network. The second one came days before Payback. Payback was great, so I'm not going to say it overshadowed Payback. I would say they're on the same level, but that was a great show. The third one was not in the same week of Night of Champions. The fourth one was only days before TLC, and it blew TLC out of the water. That was the best special to date. And TLC was not a terrible show. It was a good show, I would say. But that special was fucking amazing with everything that had to line up for that show. I don't know if this upcoming TakeOver special is going to top it. We'll have to wait and see. But still, though, that special blew that show, blew TLC out of the water with everything they had on, with everything they featured on that show. And like I said to multiple people in the past, and like after that happened, I mean, this is coming from the same company. It's not like it's WWE and TNA. This is coming from within the same company. The developmental territory with the rookies, quote unquote, was better than the main product and the pay-per-view, which was surreal to me. But absolutely, the answer to your question, I do think NXT TakeOver, the upcoming special on Wednesday night, which I'm very much looking forward to, will be better than Fastlane in a couple weeks. Fastlane, it could be great, given what we currently have on tap. Cena and Rusev, I'm not a huge fan of, but Roman Reigns and Bryan, a lot of suspense, a lot of excitement, a lot of buzz around that matchup. Ambrose and Barrett for the Intercontinental Championship, presumably. Sting showing up and answering Triple H's challenge. Like, a lot of great stuff on tap for that show. But with what's on tap for NXT TakeOver in nWo versus Balor, Steen versus Zayn for the championship, the 4-way for the women's championship, the tag team title match, Dempsey versus Corbin, no DQ, and almost a rumored matchup in Hideo Itami versus Tyler Breeze. It's looking like a hell of a show, so I'm looking forward to it. So to answer your question, the chances are very, very good that NXT TakeOver will be better than Fastlane. All that being said, folks, that's going to wrap it up for today's edition of #AskGSM. Going over an hour today. That's all due in part to your awesome questions, so keep on sending them in on Twitter with the hashtag #AskGSM, at WrestleRant on Facebook, Graham Jason Matthews. You can leave a comment on the post that I usually put up on Sunday nights or on the page itself. It's always there, so make sure to leave a comment. Or you can leave a comment on this video, and I'll be sure to include it in next week's edition. So with all that being said, folks, once again, thanks for listening, watching. Always appreciate it. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. All support is very much appreciated. I'll catch you guys next week. Thanks once again for listening, and I'll catch you guys down the road.